We have seen from recent events that climate change is having an impact on the UK. This year in particular, we are seeing record temperatures being set, experiencing drought conditions, to then having flash flooding across parts of the country. It's these extremes in weather patterns which we will discuss in this video and how climate change will impact flood risk. Why is flooding such a big problem? Flooding is the UK's most frequent natural hazard. We live on an island surrounded by water, and the UK's most populated cities centre around a river or a coastline. It's understood that 1 in 6 residential properties in the UK are at some level of flood risk. Over 249,000 properties in the UK are at risk of surface water flooding, and since 2019 the annual cost of repairing flood damage is on average £250 million. So how will climate change affect the UK? I want to recap on the observations so far, as there may be some new viewers to these videos, and it's important to highlight and remind us of these changes and what to expect in the future, as these changes will impact on flood risk. So we already know that the UK has already warmed by 1 degree C since around the 1950s. We can see this from observations from the Met Office land-based weather stations, and there are lots of other ways we can observe this change. Examples include increased temperature in coastal seas around the UK, less frost and snow, longer and more frequent warm and hot spells, shorter and less frequent cold spells, and breaking many high temperature records, as we've seen recently. The graph was produced by the Met Office after our recent heatwave in July and represents the top 10 hottest UK days on record. You can see that 9 out of the 10 are since 1990, and the orange circle I've just added, which shows the recent record temperature set on the 19th of July at 40.2 degrees C. If we think back to the last few years, 2020 saw a number of other records broken. February had a number of named storms, and rainfall totals were above average across all areas of the UK, with many places getting more than 3 times their expected average. Therefore, February was recorded as the wettest February since records began in 1862. Then there was a change in the weather from mid-March, and the UK had a record-breaking sunniest spring with 626.2 hours of sunshine. Then the summer ended with 2 named storms, Storm Ellen on August 19th, and then Storm Frances on August 24th, which is unusual to have 2 so close together in summer. The 3rd of October was recorded as the wettest day since records began in 1891. And we ended 2020 with another storm, Storm Bella, which led to flooding in parts of Bedfordshire on Christmas Eve. In 2021, we started January off with Storm Christoph, causing widespread flooding again. Then in 2022, February had 3 named storms, Dudley, Eunice and Franklin, and was recorded as the 8th wettest February since 1836. And then we had the flash flooding in the past few weeks in August, after being declared as being in a drought, with July being recorded as the driest since 1935. And I'll explain the reasons for that flooding as we go through this video. So let's now focus on specific areas which will impact flood risk. In the future, we project that the intensity of rainfall will increase. When we talk about intensity, we mean how heavy rainfall is when it occurs. In the summer, this could increase by up to 20%. In winter, this could increase by up to 25%. Hourly rainfall exceeding 30 millimetres per hour is the threshold used by the Met Office and the Environment Agency Flood Forecasting Centre to issue flash flood alerts. By 2070, we project we will meet this threshold twice as often as we did in 1990. A greater risk of flooding will have large impacts both on the environment and on our daily lives. And quite simply, if we do not do anything to reduce our emissions now, this is going to become a very real future risk from our climate. And frequent and intense rainfall will cause an increase in flooding, which we will need to adapt to. As you'll all be aware, we are now designated as being in a drought with lots of hosepipe bans across the UK. A drought is a period of time when an area or region experiences below normal precipitation. When it comes to climate change, droughts are quite hard to predict, as they are a result of a number of different factors, including rainfall patterns, which can vary from region to region. Some areas are predicted to become wetter, whilst others are likely to become drier. UKCP8 has, however, predicted a trend towards drier summers on average, especially for the southern parts of the UK. With varying rainfall patterns, the warmer temperatures can also increase evaporation of water from the ground. So as the soils become drier, the heat above the ground will cause even more water evaporating. Sea level rise is already happening. A Met Office report known as the State of the UK Climate Report 2020 shows that the UK sea level rose by over 16.5 centimetres since 1901. The current rate is 3.6 millimetres a year, and it's therefore predicted to rise by up to 40 centimetres by 2100. A 2-degree C rise would increase this to approximately 40 centimetres by 2100, and such an increase could impact approximately 200,000 properties in England by 2050. According to the journal Oceans and Coastal Management, some of the areas at risk of coastal erosion include Haysborough in Norfolk, Filey in North Yorkshire, and Camber in East Sussex. And parts of Yorkshire, Wales and West Sussex could also be flooded by rising sea levels, and we will need to assess whether our coastal defences are able to withstand rising sea levels and storm surges. So how will climate change affect flooding? Climate change is increasing the risk of both flooding and drought within the UK. As the atmosphere warms, it can hold more water, which is then released during rainfall events. A study from 2017 concluded that heavy rainfall events like Storm Desmond, which affected northern England and southern Scotland in December 2015, have been made about 40% more likely by climate change. In the future, 1.7 million properties will be at risk of a 1 in 75 flood event if global warming reaches 2 degrees C above the pre-industrial temperature. Over the last decade, more than 120,000 new homes in England and Wales have been built in floodplain areas, and this is a potential issue if flooding hasn't been considered during the planning process. Something we're seeing already with climate change is the changing rainfall patterns, where it's becoming more intense and is coming down in sharp bursts of rainfall concentrated in smaller areas. The recent flash flooding in August saw one area in England experiencing almost twice the monthly rainfall in a 3-hour period. The changing rainfall patterns in turn with both building, which results in pavements, driveways, roads and less permeable areas for water to infiltrate into the ground, as well as the anticipated drier summers and potential drought conditions, will only make this situation worse. So why does drought make it worse? The major effect of drought that it has on soil is something called hydrophobicity, when water is repelled. This occurs when organic matter dries out and forms a layer of material on top which keeps the water out. This causes the water to then run via overland flow rather than infiltrating into the ground. Also, vegetation has a number of ways to reduce the impact of flash flooding. It firstly slows water down, but if all the vegetation has been killed off due to the drier conditions, this also means that water can flow over the surface. It also helps to make larger droplets of rainfall during a thunderstorm form into smaller ones by breaking it down. This becomes less damaging to the soil surface and enables greater infiltration. Coastal flooding is being influenced by a number of factors. The land is still adjusting to the last ice age, and that means that parts of southern England are sinking about 0.6 millimetres a year, while parts of Scotland are rising by 1 millimetres a year. In a high emission scenario, which is where we carry on burning fossil fuels and there's no reduction, the Met Office has projected that by 2100, parts of the UK will see sea level increase by 1 metres, and therefore this could potentially be worse given that some of the land is also sinking. The impacts of sea level rise will become worse during high tides and storm conditions, which causes coastlines and estuaries to flood. In 2018, the Climate Change Committee projected that by 2080, up to 1.5 million properties in England, including 1.2 million homes, may be at a significant threat of coastal flood risk. How climate change will impact groundwater is still uncertain, as there's so many factors which affect whether flooding will occur. There are three main instances where groundwater flooding takes place, and we'll go through these now. The first is when the aquifer is recharged via rainfall. For groundwater flooding to occur, there needs to be prolonged periods of persistent rainfall. Typically, the recharge months are between September and April. As the water table rises, it may flood basements or even flood valleys where the water table meets the surface or a spring. The British Geological Survey have used climate change predictions to model how climate change might impact the recharge of an aquifer. It is likely that the recharge period will be shorter, but with rainfall intensity increasing, it might recharge quicker. The next is from increased river levels, which force water through the surface deposits such as alluvium or sandy gravelly deposits such as the river terrace deposits. The Environment Agency has set out climate change allowances for changes in peak flow to rivers, and these are much higher. So plus 25% up to plus 105% in extreme cases. These river levels are expected to be seen largely in the southeast of England. Given these increased river levels, we are likely to see more groundwater flooding associated with this. And then the last mechanism is rising sea levels. We have seen that the sea level may rise between 40 centimetres to up to 1 metre by 2100. If this does occur, the average groundwater levels in coastal areas will rise and will potentially result in groundwater flooding inland as the water within the aquifer is pushed back. This could potentially happen in tidal estuary locations. So what is the UK doing to reduce the risk of flooding? We've all seen the devastation caused by flooding and how it can impact our lives. The next few slides will provide details on how we manage our land, where we build our homes, and how best to defend against flooding, and this will be critical for years to come. Already the government has pledged £5.2 billion for new flood and coastal defences by 2027. This money is part of a plan for a green industrial revolution announced in November 2020. One particular coastal defence scheme is in Southsea, which is the UK's largest local authority-led coastal defences project, worth more than £130 million. It will stretch for 4.5 kilometres from Old Portsmouth to East Knee. The design will comprise of a sloped seawall known as a revetment and a set-back defence. This will help to reduce the risk of flooding to more than 10,000 homes and 700 businesses. Approximately 4,000 of these properties are at risk of direct threshold inundation. Construction began in September 2020 and is due for completion in 2028. Surrey County Council has committed to spending £33 million over the next 10 years from the Surrey Flood Alleviation Programmes on long-term flood risk management work to protect homes and roads. Projects so far include Catering on the Hill, where the County Council will be installing resilience measures to 50 properties, which started in February 2022. And projects which are involving partners including the Environment Agency and district and borough councils in locations such as Leatherhead and Fetcham, Samway and Byfleet, Brooklands and also Guildford. Guildford has had a number of flood events. The worst was in 1968, where a significant part of the town was flooded. Other flood events include the winter of 2013 to 2014, with 92 properties being flooded, 2000, where 29 properties were flooded, and also August 2018, when a heavy downpour overwhelmed the surface water drains in the town centre, causing flooding to many properties and businesses. As part of the Guildford Economic Regeneration Programme, there will be a flood alleviation scheme designed to support this. The project is still looking at design options for areas through the town centre, including flood defences to protect roads close to the River Wey, including Mary Road, William Road and Lees Road. Flood defences around the Millbrook area to protect highway infrastructure. The regeneration around Bedford Wharf to integrate flood risk management measures into the development proposals, and demountable flood defences, which may form part of a solution as well. On the 25th of August 2022, the government issued new guidance to the National Planning Policy Framework to help ensure new developments are designed with flood resilience in mind and do not increase flood risk elsewhere. The new changes means that the councils will be better placed to apply government policy where new homes are in areas of risk of flooding, and should meet recommended standards on flood resilience, for example, using flood resilient building materials or moving plug sockets higher up walls. Under the NPPF, guidance has already been in place to assess new developments in flood risk areas, and any development over 1 hectare or in a flood zone should have a flood risk assessment completed, which involves a consultant assessing all types of flood risk, assessing the depth of flooding and providing recommendations on design. This should be done prior to any development plans, as properties will need to be flood resilient. So how can a lawyer advise their clients? The Law Society Practice Note aims to help solicitors protect clients from flood risk, which is increasingly a concern for those owning or occupying property, and provides information for those who are looking to buy property in flood-prone areas. The Law Society issued its practice note on flooding in May 2013 and updated it for flood RE in February 2016. Since then, it's been updated again in March 2020, reiterating the importance of flood risk as a key transactional issue in any residential and commercial transaction after the devastating effects the winter floods of 2020 had on parts of the UK. What should you do? Firstly, be aware. Highlight the importance of understanding flood risk to your client, especially as this may increase with climate change. Secondly, make inquiries to the seller. These inquiries should be asking if the property has flooded in the past. And then thirdly, commission a flood search. At Landmark, our flood assessments are completed by a consultant when a high risk has been identified from the data. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions on how Landmark can support you with highlighting climate change risks for your clients, please contact our environmental experts using the email address shown here, or do please call us on 0330 036 6115. Thank you.